This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I'm your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing.
I got one more thing I'd like to talk to you about right now.
Sean Bickings is a name you may not be familiar with, and you'd be forgiven if you didn't live in Arizona or the greater Phoenix metropolitan area. But he has made some national headlines for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. He is a black man that Tempe police watched drown in the city of Tempe, Arizona, which is adjacent to the city of Phoenix, where Arizona State University is housed. And his drowning took place about a year ago. And around here, and of course on my show, we said a lot about that. There were protests. Of course, there was a community response. And then on my radio show, I should be specific, Civic Cypher, this was something that we had to talk about as well. Because there's no reason that anyone should die from something that's preventable while a public servant who is sworn to protect life observes casually and indeed mocks the individual as they're drowning. Now, to give you a little bit of background of the story, I invite you to, read the account yourself or read the transcripts, but I will summarize it here. Sean Bickings was an unsheltered individual. It got into an argument with his wife. Some folks called the police out to make sure everyone was okay. And in short order, they determined that there was no physical exchange. It was just verbal. And as is standard procedure, they asked to check his ID to see if he had any outstanding warrants or anything like that. At this point, Sean Bickings jumped over a railing into the Tempe Town Lake. We won't know his reasons for doing that. I have not found that he was wanted of any crime, but I suspect that his mental health wasn't optimal in that moment. He was under distress, and obviously that's a fearful situation if you know how often unsheltered people are the targets of police action, police violence, and police shootings. So he jumps over the railing, and the police say, I'm not jumping in after you. And then his wife, she's upset, and she's like, help him out. He's saying he's drowning. And they're telling him to swim back to the edge. And he's like, I can't. And she's imploring them to jump in after him. And they tell her that if she keeps going, they're going to put her in the back of the car. And eventually, Sean Bickings goes under, and he doesn't come back up. Problematic. Now, again, as is standard procedure, the officers, I believe there were 3 of them, were placed on leave, paid administrative leave, after that incident, so that it could be investigated. And because of the community response, the pressure mounted for the investigation to have a different set of eyes. So what set of eyes were those, you ask? Well, that would be the Scottsdale Police Department. And Scottsdale, again, is another adjacent city. So again, they're brothers in arms. Hey, can you investigate this just so that we can be objective? Problematic. But that's not it. That's not the only thing. I wish that was it, because those are things that we're accustomed to seeing as standard practice. The thing is, I often make a comparison between Black people and dogs. Here's what I mean when I say that. If there was a video of a Black man being beaten by the police, shot by the police, you name it, people have a tendency to villainize the Black man, or Black woman, or Black person. They must be the bad guy. They obviously weren't obeying lawful commands, even though there were no commands, or the person was doing their best to obey them, or in fact was obeying them. Or, he must have been guilty of something. Otherwise, why is he running, or why are the police there? Or what, these sort of like villainizing the individual who is on the receiving end of the harm by police. Now, comparison to dogs is a constant thought experiment I ask people to undertake is, well, swap out the person, the human being there, for a dog. As you know, in this country, there's an obsession with dogs, man's best friend. People love their dogs. And as soon as there's violence against animals, people flip out. And in those moments, when you ask people to swap the cogs and see if they still feel the same way, often enough for the same exact scenario, you realize people come to terms with their own prejudices, their own biases. And what makes this incident even more problematic is that weeks prior to Sean Bickings drowning, a dog was rescued from the canal. A canal is sort of a waterway that we have here in Arizona in the populated areas. And Tempe police, same department, found an animal in the canal and jumped in and rescued the animal. Animal still alive right now. His name is Salty. I'd like to take this moment to remind you that Sean Bickings is dead. And the officers watched and mocked him. So why are we talking about this? Well, we ask police to do too much. In addition, we hold police in a certain light, this light of brave, heroic, almost like an everyday Superman. They're expected to do all things, and they are not perfect beings. In fact, they are far from perfect beings, and the institution that they represent was founded in our Black people's oppression. And so we need to reconcile this with the reality. These officers were very cold, and they are now facing the consequences of that. Recently, Sean Bickings' mother filed suit against the officers in the Tempe Police Department. And so this is why we're talking about this today, because it's back in the news. But For folks that call the police, anything that is not a fire or is not someone bleeding that a person finds to be problematic or difficult, there's only one number that many people can call. Not everyone has a ton of friends that can come and support them. Not everyone has a big family or other resources. So many people, they just got those three numbers, 911. And after 2020, we really had to take a long, hard look at what policing is versus what it should be. So again, you have a situation with an argument between a husband and a wife. This is commonplace. It was reported as such. Then three people with guns, murder weapons, show up. They cannot deal with, they're not marriage counselors. They're not helping clearly they're not helping the situation. They don't know how to deal with people that are in crisis. They know how to attack. We've seen that time and again. And I know that I paint with broad strokes, and I want to be fair in this conversation because there are many officers who do their best to do their best. But the institution and the very nature of it ensures that a person prepared to kill will show up at your doorstep if you are in a moment of crisis beyond a fire or a physical medical emergency that you're enduring. And of course, a lack of friends. Or friends who can get to you quickly. Now, these officers obviously didn't honor what we, the general public, would consider to be their oath to protect and serve. There was no protection in this instance. There was no serving in this instance. They watched a man die, and they could have intervened and made all the difference in the world. As illustrated by the fact that the same department with the same training had officers that jumped into a canal to save a dog. And these expectations make it difficult for police to be effective at jobs that are beyond the scope of what it is that their training is mostly focused on, which is, if I'm honest, my interpretation is preserving their own life. If they get the least bit spooked about anything, pull the gun out and start shooting everything in sight. And they might have a weekend course on de-escalating a situation. But that target practice, that is constant. Make sure you're ready to kill. Is this what we want? Are these people supposed to help? And if so, we're spending a lot of money on the people with guns and not enough money on the type of people who could respond to situations like these in an appropriate manner with the appropriate training. And dare I say, the heart to make a difference. We've seen examples of community policing, good and bad. But I applaud those efforts because it's rethinking policing. That's what we need, especially Black people, because if you know, like I do, we're often at the bottom end of this. We get the worst treatment of all. So not only is it not fair to the officers, because they don't know what to do, and perhaps as a result, they may not care the way that we would expect. As a result, they're not able to provide effective services to the majority of Americans. You know, in hosting Civic Cypher, I've covered many incidents of police violence and police killings against white people. So white people and white families and white communities suffer as a result of this. But as you know, Black people get it the worst. So a rethink is in order. A reallocating of funding to manifest what we end up with on the other side of our rethink is in order. And I believe that Sean Bickings' story is proof positive that that is absolutely necessary. So now I turn the floor over to you. As always, you can reach out to me using the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app, or you can hit me on all social media at Ramses Ja. We'll talk soon. And until we do, peace. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.